Hey, staff aren't supposed to touch that piano, especially tonight.
The hotel cleaner's fingers hovered over the keys as laughter rolled softly behind the warning. Someone muttering about knowing one's place at a billion-dollar gala. Crystal glasses clinked, silk brushed marble, and the message settled in. This wasn't his room. Instead of stepping away, he pressed one key, then another, the sound calm and deliberate. Across the lobby, the CEO's posture stiffened, her gaze snapping toward the melody like she'd been called by name. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. What was really happening beneath the surface wasn't about a rule broken or a piano touched. It was about memory colliding with power, about a song that refused to stay buried, and about how truth doesn't ask permission before it speaks. Before anyone noticed, the air had changed, and the hierarchy everyone trusted had started to crack. He didn't look up when a second voice hissed that security would be called. He didn't apologize. He just kept playing, shoulders loose, tempo steady, like the room had finally gone quiet enough to hear him. The melody was simple at first, almost shy, then it folded inward, carrying something unfinished, something aching. Julian Mercer had learned long ago that reacting only fed people who mistook noise for control. Calm was harder to argue with. He wore a cleaner's uniform because it paid the bills and let him leave before midnight. He stayed because his son needed routine more than recognition. Noah sat on a bench near the service corridor, knees tucked to his chest, eyes fixed on the polished floor. Crowds made his breathing hitch sometimes, especially when voices sharpened. The piano had always helped. It was the one sound that smoothed the edges of his world, even when nothing else could. A woman in a tailored black dress stepped closer. Irritation etched into her smile. "This event is private," she said, gesturing toward the keys. "You're disrupting it." He nodded once, not in agreement but acknowledgement, and let the melody answer for him. A few guests rolled their eyes. Someone scoffed about background noise. No one noticed the way the CEO's hand tightened around her glass, knuckles paling as recognition crept in against her will. The song shifted, revealing its spine. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't meant to impress. It was a confession shaped like music, and it carried the weight of something written for one person alone. Noah's shoulders eased, his breathing slowed. He leaned back against the wall, trusting the sound more than the room. The events director, Marianne Holt, hovered at the edge of the crowd, caught between protocol and instinct. She'd heard hundreds of pianists play that instrument. None like this. None who made the room feel smaller and more exposed at the same time. "Should I stop him?" a security guard whispered. Marianne hesitated. "Wait," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure why. The CEO took a step forward before she realized she was moving. Ilara Whitcomb had built her empire on precision and control, on never letting the past dictate the present. But the melody reached places money never could. It carried a name she hadn't spoken in decades, a promise left unfinished, a life she'd sealed away behind success. The cleaner's hands moved with certainty, not show. The rhythm breathed. Guests fell silent one by one, unsure when they decided to listen. Phones lowered. Whispers died. Someone finally recognized the tune. "That song," a woman murmured, confusion threading her voice. "I've never heard it recorded." "Because it wasn't meant to be." Julian felt the moment cresting, the way a tide changed before it turned. He kept his eyes on the keys. This wasn't for them, it never had been. It was for the boy breathing easier behind him, and for the part of himself he'd folded away to survive. Ilara stopped a few feet from the piano. Her composure cracked, just enough to be seen. The room watched, sensing significance without understanding it yet. Power didn't vanish in that instant, but it faltered, unsure of its footing. The final notes lingered, unresolved by design. He lifted his hands and let the silence finish what sound had started. Noah looked up, calm now, eyes searching for his father's face. Julian turned and met his gaze, offering a small nod that said everything was okay. Behind them, the gala stood frozen, guests suspended between spectacle and truth, and in that stillness everyone felt it. The unmistakable sense that something private had just become impossible to ignore. Silence held the lobby after the last note faded, thick enough to feel against skin. No one clapped, no one spoke. The kind of pause that made people aware of their own breathing settled in, broken only by the soft hum of chandeliers overhead. He stayed seated, hands resting, loosely in his lap, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if the room hadn't just tilted on its axis. Elara Whitcomb was the first to move. She didn't rush, she didn't retreat. She simply stood there, eyes fixed on the piano, jaw tight, memories pressing hard against a present she controlled with ruthless discipline. A few guests followed her gaze, then looked back at the man in the uniform, recalculating him in real time. "That's enough," someone muttered near the bar, uncertain now. "This isn't appropriate." Marianne Holt stepped forward, voice measured but strained. "We'll take a short pause," she announced, lifting her hand slightly. "Please enjoy refreshments while we reset." No one moved. The word reset felt inadequate. The cleaner finally stood, smoothing his sleeves, and turned toward the bench where his son waited. Noah's eyes were bright but calm, his chest rising evenly now. Relief loosened something in the man's shoulders as he crossed the few steps between them. "You okay?" he asked quietly. The boy nodded. "It helped," he said, simple and sure. That certainty mattered more than the room full of strangers. Behind them, whispers spread, cautious at first, then bolder. Someone recognized the melody's structure, the way it refused a clean ending. Someone else mentioned a composer who'd vanished years ago, a name spoken carefully, like it might bruise. Elara heard it all. She felt the weight of eyes turning toward her, waiting for explanation, command, dismissal. Her world didn't allow unanswered questions, especially not public ones. She straightened, preparing to reclaim the narrative. "Who allowed this?" she asked, voice steady but colder now. Marianne hesitated. "He was calming his child," she said. "There was no disruption until he disrupted," Elara cut in. He turned at that, meeting her gaze without challenge. "I'll stop," he said simply. "We're leaving." The ease of it disarmed a few people. He wasn't pleading, he wasn't defiant, just practical. "That won't be necessary," Elara replied, though she wasn't sure why the words came out that way. She gestured toward the piano. "That song, where did you learn it?" A ripple moved through the crowd. This wasn't the dismissal they'd expected. He considered her question, eyes flicking briefly to Noah before answering. "I wrote it," he said. The words landed softly, devastating in their quiet. Someone laughed, too loud, too quick. "That's impossible." Elara didn't laugh. Color drained from her face as recognition locked into place, undeniable now. The room seemed to lean closer. "You're saying," she began, then stopped, breath catching. "That melody was never finished," he said gently. "It wasn't meant for anyone else." The gala fractured into murmurs. Phones came out despite the etiquette drilled into everyone here. Marianne watched it happen, the moment slipping beyond containment. If you're feeling that pause right now, subscribe. because this is where the truth stops being private and starts changing people. Ilara took a step closer, her authority suddenly irrelevant against the gravity of memory. "Your name?" she said. He hesitated, then shook his head. "That doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she replied, almost too quietly. He studied her face, the power, the polish, the woman who'd built walls high enough to keep the past out until music found a way in. "Not tonight," he said. "Tonight's for him." Noah shifted closer, sensing the attention. Small hand slipping into his father's. The gesture grounded him. Around them, guests began to understand that this wasn't entertainment. It was exposure. Something intimate unfolding where spectacle usually lived. Ilara straightened again, composure returning in fragments. "We'll continue the event," she announced, though no one missed the tremor. "Thank you for your contribution." The word contribution sounded fragile. He nodded once, already turning away, guiding his son toward the service corridor. The crowd parted without realizing they'd done it, eyes following them with new awareness. Behind them, the piano sat untouched, its truth released into a room built on appearances. And Ilara Whitcomb stood very still, surrounded by witnesses who'd just seen power hesitate for the first time. They slipped into the service corridor, the door swinging shut behind them with a soft final click that cut off the murmur of the gala. The air back there smelled faintly of polish and detergent, familiar and grounding. He slowed his pace once they were out of sight, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Noah leaned into his side as they walked, small fingers still curled tight, the echo of the melody lingering between them like warmth. Behind the door, the lobby struggled to remember itself. Guests attempted conversation, laughter landing in the wrong places, too loud or too late. No one quite knew how to proceed when the emotional center of the room had just walked away in a maintenance uniform. Eyes kept drifting toward the piano, then toward the CEO, waiting to see which one would be acknowledged first. The hierarchy everyone trusted felt oddly incomplete now. Ilara remained where she was, glass untouched in her hand. The words he'd spoken replayed relentlessly, precise and devastating. "I wrote it." The memory she'd sealed away surged forward, no longer content to stay abstract. She remembered the cramped apartment, the cheap upright piano, the way that melody had filled the room with possibility before life had intervened. She'd told herself she'd imagined its power. Hearing it again proved she hadn't. Marianne Holt approached cautiously, lowering her voice. "Do you want me to handle this?" she asked, gesturing vaguely toward the corridor. Ilara didn't answer right away. Her gaze followed the direction they'd gone, authority faltering under something far more personal. "No," she said finally. "I will." In the corridor, he knelt briefly to adjust his son's jacket, making sure the zipper sat comfortably under his chin. "You did great back there," he said quietly. Noah shrugged, a shy smile tugging at his mouth. "You always play that one when it's loud." He nodded, because it listens back. They reached the maintenance alcove where his cart waited, tools neatly arranged, order in a world that preferred chaos hidden behind elegance. He rested a hand on the metal handle, considering whether to leave now, whether disappearing again would be easier. It always had been. But the way Ilara's voice had softened, the way the room had held its breath, told him the choice might no longer be his alone. The corridor door opened again. Ilara stepped through without announcement, heels quiet on the tile, posture composed but eyes unguarded. She stopped a few feet away, taking in the cart, the child, the ordinary reality she'd never bothered to notice before. "I remember that song," she said, skipping formality entirely. "I remember the night it was written." He didn't correct her. He didn't confirm it either. "It was a long time ago," he said. "For me too," she replied. But hearing it, her voice trailed off, the sentence unfinished in the same way the melody was. Noah looked between them, sensing significance without context. He tightened his grip, grounding his father again. "This isn't the place," Ilara said, gesturing vaguely back toward the gala. "And tonight isn't the time, but I need to understand." He considered her words, weighing the cost of reopening something he'd buried carefully for years. "Understanding doesn't always help," he said. "Sometimes it just makes things harder." "Harder than pretending it never existed?" she asked softly. The question lingered between them, fragile and dangerous. He glanced down at his son, then back at her. "I have to go," he said. "He needs quiet." Ilara nodded, accepting the boundary even as it unsettled her. "Then let me make sure no one stops you," she said, "or treats you like background again." A beat passed. He inclined his head, acknowledgement rather than gratitude. He took Noah's hand and began to move past her, the corridor suddenly feeling narrower, heavier, with unspoken history. As they walked away, Ilara remained still, the hum of the building pressing in. The gala continued without its emotional anchor, but the damage was done. Guests would talk, staff would whisper, the melody would follow her long after the night ended. For the first time in years, she understood that power couldn't silence everything. Some truths waited patiently, then surfaced where witnesses couldn't unsee them. Ilara stayed in the service corridor long after they disappeared around the corner, the soft echo of their footsteps fading into the building's bones. The hum of ventilation filled the silence, steady and indifferent, a reminder that systems kept moving whether people were ready or not. She drew a slow breath, straightened her jacket, and returned to the gala with the practiced control that had built her empire. The room adjusted the moment she re-entered. Conversations lifted, laughter found its volume again, and glasses were raised as if nothing intimate had just unfolded. But the shift lingered in people's eyes. They watched her more closely now, waiting for cues, for proof that the moment hadn't unsettled the person at the center of power. Marianne Holt met her near the bar, relief flickering across her face. "Security's standing down," she murmured. "No incidents." Ilara nodded. "Good." She scanned the room once more, taking in the piano, the guests, the carefully curated illusion of normalcy. "Continue as planned." The words sounded hollow to her ears. She moved through the crowd, responding automatically to greetings and congratulations, but her attention kept drifting. Every laugh landed too sharply. Every compliment felt distant. The melody replayed again and again in her mind, threading memory through spaces she'd sealed with success and time. At the edge of the room, two guests spoke in hushed tones. She caught fragments without trying. A lost composer, a vanished talent, a song no one had heard before tonight. The speculation was already taking shape, bending toward narrative. She stepped in smoothly. "Enjoying the evening?" she asked. They startled, then nodded, eager to please. The conversation shifted instantly to safer topics. She smiled and moved on, but the damage was done. Stories, once seated, rarely stayed contained. Back in the service corridor, he guided Noah toward the staff exit, the clatter of carts and low voices replacing the gala's sheen. The building felt different here, honest in its wear. He welcomed it. Noah's steps had slowed, the adrenaline fading. "Are we in trouble?" the boy asked quietly. He shook his head. No, we're just done for the night. They paused near the exit, the cool air pressing faintly through the doors. He checked his watch, calculating the bus schedule, the rhythm of getting home without disruption. Routine mattered, especially after nights like this. Behind them, Marianne caught up, breathless. She asked me to make sure you left without interference, she said. No one's stopping you. He nodded. Thank you. Marianne hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, that was beautiful. He met her gaze briefly. It was necessary. She smiled, a little sadly, and let them go. Outside, the night wrapped around them, quiet and forgiving. He took Noah's hand, guiding him toward the curb where the city waited, indifferent and familiar. The glow of the hotel loomed behind them, all glass and promise, but it no longer held him. Inside, Ilara retreated to a private lounge, closing the door against the noise. She leaned against the counter, finally allowing the mask to slip. The weight of the moment settled fully now, pressing against years of carefully curated distance. She poured a glass of water and stared at the surface, watching ripples distort her reflection. She hadn't planned for this. She'd spent decades ensuring the past remained exactly where she'd left it. But hearing the song again had cracked something open, a fault line running beneath the life she'd built. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant, concise and cautious. The press was already asking questions. Someone had uploaded a clip. The comments were multiplying. She closed her eyes briefly. Control, she reminded herself, wasn't about denial. It was about response. Ilara typed a short directive, precise and measured. No statements tonight, no takedowns, let it breathe. She set the phone down and looked again at the piano through the glass. It sat untouched now, its presence louder in silence than it had been with sound. She understood dimly that tonight had marked a shift she couldn't undo. Across town, he and Noah boarded the bus, finding seats near the back. The city slid past in blurred lights, ordinary and steady. Noah leaned against him, eyelids drooping. You didn't finish it, the boy murmured. He smiled faintly. I never do. Will you someday? Maybe, he said. Some things need the right moment. Noah nodded, satisfied, and drifted toward sleep. As the bus pulled away, the hotel's lights receded, becoming just another building in a city full of them. Inside it, a CEO grappled with memory and meaning. Outside, a father held his son, anchored in what mattered most. The melody lingered between them both, unfinished, waiting to see what would follow. The bus hummed beneath them, tires whispering over asphalt as the city thinned into quieter blocks. He shifted slightly to keep Noah comfortable, the boys breathing slow, and even now, a small miracle after the noise and eyes and pressure of the night. Streetlights slid across the window in soft bands, turning the glass into a moving metronome. He counted them without meaning to, a habit from years of keeping tempo in his head. At the hotel, the gala dissolved into pockets of speculation. Guests lingered longer than planned, conversations looping back to the piano no matter how hard hosts tried to redirect. Someone replayed a grainy clip, sound tinny but unmistakable. The melody cut through the chatter again and again. Phones glowed, meaning gathered. Ilara watched it happen from the quiet of her office, jacket draped over the chair, hair loosened for the first time that evening. She didn't call anyone to spin it. She didn't issue a denial. She let the clip play through to the unfinished end and felt the old ache settle where it always had. The song hadn't changed, she had. A knock sounded. Marianne stepped in, careful. It's spreading, she said. Staff are sharing it, guests too. Ilara nodded. Let them. That's not. Marianne stopped herself. Okay. The bus stopped. He adjusted his grip as Noah stirred, then settled again. The quiet gave him space to feel what he'd held back, relief first, then the familiar weight of exposure. He'd chosen anonymity for a reason. It kept things simple, but the melody had chosen otherwise tonight. At home, he carried Noah inside, laid him gently on the couch, then tucked a blanket around his shoulders. The apartment was small, clean, the piano bench pressed against a wall beside a keyboard with chipped keys. He stood there a moment listening to the refrigerator hum, the building's pipes ticking as they cooled. Ordinary sounds. Anchors. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He didn't answer. Back at the hotel, Ilara convened a brief meeting with legal and communications. She listened more than she spoke, eyes drifting to the window as phrases like narrative control and brand integrity floated past. When they paused, waiting for direction, she surprised them. No takedowns, she said. No statements tonight. We'll acknowledge the moment in the morning. A lawyer frowned. Acknowledge how? With truth, Ilara replied, carefully, fully. They exchanged looks. This wasn't how she usually moved. The night deepened. Comments multiplied. Someone identified the composer from an old program photo, a name whispered like a dare. Someone else countered with uncertainty. The debate sharpened. Memory does that when it escapes. If this moment is landing for you, subscribe, because the reckoning isn't in the clip. It's in what follows when silence no longer works. He stood at the kitchen counter rinsing a mug when the phone buzzed again. Same number. He answered this time, voice steady. Hello. Ilara Whitcomb, the voice said, composed but unguarded. I won't keep you long. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. It's late. I know, she said. I needed to say this before it became something else. I'm sorry for how you were treated tonight. He considered the apology, its timing, its cost. Thank you, he said. That matters. I'd like to meet, she continued, privately, to understand what surfaced, to do right by it. Understanding isn't a transaction, he said gently. I know, she replied. That's why I'm asking. He glanced toward the couch where Noah slept, then back to the quiet kitchen. Tomorrow, he said. Early, somewhere public. Of course. They hung up. He set the phone down and leaned against the counter, feeling the room settle. He hadn't promised anything beyond conversation. That felt right. Morning arrived without spectacle. News outlets framed the clip, as a curiosity at first, then as something more. A question about labor, art, and who gets heard. Staff at the hotel shared their own stories in comment threads. The piano became shorthand for a truth people recognized. Ilara read every word. She didn't reply. He walked Noah to school, hand warm in his, the boy chatting about a drawing he wanted to finish. At the corner cafe, he ordered coffee and waited. Ilara arrived on time, no entourage, posture open. They sat. The city moved around them. I never heard it finished, she said after a moment. It isn't, he replied. They spoke quietly, not about blame, but about choice, about leaving, about staying, about how the wrong room can erase a person and how a single sound can bring them back. By the time they parted, the public had already decided something important. The man with the mop and the melody wasn't background, he was a witness, and the CEO who froze had been seen freezing. Exposure doesn't need a spotlight. Sometimes it only needs a song, played where everyone can hear it. They left the cafe separately, as agreed, the conversation lingering heavier than either of them had expected. He watched Ilara merge into the crowd, indistinguishable now from anyone else navigating the morning rush. That anonymity suited the truth better than spectacle ever could. He finished his coffee slowly, letting the city's rhythm reassert itself, then headed for the bus stop with the same measured pace he always kept. By the time he reached the hotel for his next shift, the building felt subtly altered. Not quieter, not louder, just alert. Staff greeted him with something between respect and curiosity, careful not to cross a line they didn't yet understand. No one mentioned the piano outright, but no one pretended it hadn't happened either. The silence around it was deliberate, fragile. Marianne caught up to him near the service elevator. "She's scheduled an internal review," she said under her breath. "Not just for the event, for everything." He nodded. "That's good." "And she asked if you'd be willing to speak," Marianne added quickly. "Not perform, just talk." He considered it, fingers tightening briefly around the handle of his cart. "We'll see," he said, talking's harder. Marianne smiled, relief and nerves mixing. "It usually is." Upstairs, Alara sat through a meeting she hadn't anticipated would feel like judgment, not from others, but from herself. Advisors laid out risk assessments and public sentiment analyses, graphs tracking engagement that spiked whenever the clip resurfaced. They spoke about optics, about containment. She listened, then interrupted. "We're not containing this," she said calmly. "We're responding to it." A pause followed. Someone nodded, someone else looked uncomfortable. "What happened exposed something real," Alara continued. "Not just about me, about how this place treats people it doesn't expect to listen to." No one argued. The evidence was too visible. In the lobby, he moved through his tasks with the same quiet focus, but he felt the eyes now, not invasive, evaluative. He wiped a counter, adjusted a lamp, checked a schedule board. Each small action grounded him. This was still work. That mattered. During a break, he sat near the service corridor scrolling through messages. A few from strangers. Gratitude, shared stories. He read them, then closed the app. He wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. Symbols flattened people. He'd spent years protecting himself from that. That evening, Alara walked the lobby alone. No cameras, no entourage. She stopped at the piano and rested her hand on the lid without opening it. The hotel felt different to her now, its elegance threaded with vulnerability. She saw the spaces where staff disappeared, the corridors that kept labor invisible. She hadn't noticed before. Now she couldn't unsee them. She found him, near the elevators, finishing his shift. "I won't keep you," she said. "I just wanted to tell you the review starts tomorrow, and I want you there, if you're willing." He met her gaze steadily. "I don't want to be paraded." "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm asking privately." He thought of Noah, of the way the boy trusted him to choose stability over noise. "I'll come," he said, "but I'm not there to perform." Alara nodded. "Neither am I." The review took place in a plain conference room the next morning. No branding, no stage. Staff from every level sat at the same table. The discomfort was immediate, honest. He spoke when asked, describing systems that filtered voices by title, how warnings softened as they traveled upward. He didn't accuse, he explained. Others followed. A housekeeper, a security guard, a junior tech. Each story added weight. Alara listened without interruption, hands folded, absorbing the cumulative truth of it. When it ended, nothing felt resolved. That was the point. Later, as he walked home, the city dusk wrapped around him, familiar and forgiving. Noah ran to meet him at the door, chattering about school, about a song they'd heard in class. He listened, smiled, cooked dinner. Life continued, stubbornly ordinary. But somewhere inside the hotel, processes shifted, reports rerouted, meetings restructured. Listening became less ceremonial and more practical. It wasn't dramatic. It was effective. That night, Ilara received a message from a board member questioning the direction she was taking. She replied with a single line, "We're fixing what we ignored." She turned off her phone and sat in the quiet, the melody resurfacing once more, no longer painful but instructive. It had done its work. Back in his apartment, he sat at the keyboard after Noah slept, fingers resting on the chipped keys. He played softly, not the old song, but something new. It didn't resolve either, it didn't need to. Some truths, once exposed, didn't demand endings. They demanded attention. And this time, attention had arrived, not with applause, but with change. The days that followed settled into a strange in-between, neither calm nor chaotic, but watchful. The hotel moved with deliberate care now, as if every corridor had learned to listen. He felt it most in the pauses, how supervisors waited a beat longer before dismissing a concern, how staff meetings stretched past their usual endpoints, how questions were answered instead of redirected. He didn't change his routine. He arrived early, checked schedules, wiped surfaces no one else noticed. The work steadied him. It always had. But the space around him felt altered, as if the building itself remembered what had happened and refused to forget. Marianne walked alongside him one morning, matching his pace. "People are still talking," she said quietly. "Not gossip, reflection." "That's better," he replied. "They're asking questions we've never had to answer before," she added, "about who gets heard, about why it took a moment like that." He nodded once. "Moments don't create problems," he said. "They reveal them." Upstairs, Ilara faced a different rhythm. Meetings now ended with more uncertainty than clarity, and she let them. The instinct to conclude, to wrap everything in decisiveness, tugged at her constantly. She resisted it. Listening required restraint. It demanded leaving things open longer than comfort allowed. She reviewed internal reports late into the night, patterns emerging where she'd once seen noise. Maintenance logs flagged repeatedly, softened language masking urgency. Staff turnover clustered around departments that had been praised for efficiency. The connections felt obvious now, unforgivable even. She requested another meeting. Not formal, no agenda, just staff from across the building, invited without hierarchy. When they gathered, the tension was immediate, eyes darting, bodies stiff. Ilara took a seat among them, not at the head. "I'm not here to defend anything," she said. "I'm here to understand what I've been insulated from." No one spoke at first. Then someone did, and then another. The stories weren't dramatic. That was the problem. They were ordinary, overlooked, accumulated. He listened from the back of the room, arms folded loosely, attention steady. He spoke only once, when asked, and kept it brief. "Systems don't fail all at once," he said. "They erode quietly." The room absorbed it. Later, as people filtered out, a young technician approached him, hesitant. "I didn't know you could do that," she said, meaning the piano, the composure, the way he'd spoken. He smiled faintly. "Most people don't." "That song," she added. It made something click. He nodded. "That's what music does." At home, Noah sensed the shift in him, even if he didn't name it. Dinner, conversations stretched longer. Laughter came easier. The boy practiced his breathing without being reminded, pride lighting his face when he noticed the difference. "You're not as quiet," Noah observed one evening. He considered that. Maybe I'm listening more, he said. Noah grinned. Me too. Ilara watched the ripple extend beyond the hotel. Other properties asked questions. Executives requested summaries they would have ignored a month ago. The clip still surfaced now and then, but it had lost its novelty, replaced by something more durable. Reference, a shorthand for a lesson learned publicly. She received resistance, of course. Emails framed in polite concern. Meetings that circled the same objections. She held her ground without dramatics. The moment had done that work for her. It was harder to argue with something everyone had seen. One evening, she found herself alone in the lobby after hours. The piano sat closed, bench tucked neatly in. She lifted the lid, this time hesitating before pressing a single key. The sound rang out, clean but empty. She closed it again, understanding the difference. In the service corridor, he finished his shift and paused, listening to the building settle into night. The hum felt healthier now, less strained. He couldn't prove it. He didn't need to. As he stepped outside, the city greeted him with its usual indifference. He welcomed that, too. Not everything needed witness. But inside the hotel, something essential had changed. Not because power conceded gracefully, but because it had been confronted with something it couldn't buy or silence. A melody had exposed a truth. People had listened. And now, in the aftermath, the harder work had begun, keeping that listening alive when the moment no longer demanded it. He headed home, hands in his pockets, thinking about dinner, about homework, about whether he'd play later or let the keys rest. The future didn't feel resolved, it felt possible, and for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The shift from reaction to intention happened quietly, the way real change always did. It showed up in meeting invites that included names usually left off, in revised protocols that asked for confirmation instead of compliance, in pauses where decisions used to be automatic. He noticed it without needing to be told. The building felt less defensive now, more curious. He was finishing a late round when Marianne found him near the service elevators, tablet tucked under her arm. "They want to formalize some of this," she said. "The listening channels, the reporting flow." He nodded, tightening the strap on his cart. "Formalizing helps," he said, "as long as it doesn't replace attention." She smiled. "You're not wrong." Upstairs, Ilara prepared for a board call she'd been postponing. The agenda was concise, the implications weren't. She reviewed the notes one last time, then closed them, choosing presence over script. When the screen filled with familiar faces, she didn't ease them in. "We're restructuring how information moves," she said. "Not as a pilot, permanently." A few brows lifted, one voice objected gently, citing risk, precedent, perception. She listened fully, then responded without raising her voice. "The risk was already there," she said. "We just weren't looking at it." The call ended without consensus, which told her everything she needed to know. Consensus had been overrated. Down below, he paused at the piano as he passed, not to play, just to acknowledge it. The instrument had become a marker now, a quiet reminder embedded in the building's memory. Staff glanced at it differently, so did guests. It no longer felt decorative. Noah waited for him near the lobby, backpack slung over one shoulder, drawing pad clutched tight. "Marianne said you might be late," the boy said. "Just a bit," he replied. "You okay?" Noah nodded. "I was drawing, the song." He crouched to look. Lines and shapes spiraled across the page, not notes but movement. Feeling. He smiled. "Looks right." As they waited, a staff member approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to say I spoke up today about a safety thing, and they listened." He straightened, meeting her eyes. "Good," he said. "That's how it should be." When she walked away, Noah looked up at him. "Did you make that happen?" He shook his head. "I helped people notice. The rest is theirs." If you're still with this story, subscribe now, because this is the part where quiet moments start changing systems. Ilara descended into the lobby not long after. No jacket, sleeves rolled, posture less guarded. She spotted them and approached without ceremony. "I won't interrupt," she said to Noah with a small smile. "I just wanted to say thank you for waiting." Noah shrugged, unbothered. "We're good." Ilara turned to him. "We're implementing the changes," she said. "Not just here, across properties." He considered her words carefully. "Implementation matters," he said. "So does follow-through." "I know," she replied. "That's why I want you involved, not as a figure, as a check." He felt the weight of the ask settle in his chest. Visibility had a cost, so did absence. He glanced at Noah, then back at her. "I can advise," he said. "I won't manage." She nodded. "That's fair." They stood there a moment. 3 people occupying a space that used to be governed by rules no one questioned. Around them, the hotel moved with new awareness, staff and guests weaving through the lobby without the old sharp divide. Later, as they walked home, Noah kicked at loose gravel, thoughtful. "Do you think they'll forget?" he asked. He thought about it. "Some will," he said. "That's why systems matter. They remember when people don't." At home, the evening unfolded, gently. Homework. Dinner. A quiet show playing in the background. After Noah went to bed, he sat at the keyboard again, fingers hovering. He played a few bars of the old melody, then let it dissolve into something else, something forward-moving. Across the city, Ilara reviewed drafts of the new framework, making small, deliberate changes. She felt the resistance building already. That was fine. Resistance meant friction. Friction meant movement. She closed her laptop and looked out at the lights. The song returned to her, not as loss this time, but as instruction. It had shown her what power missed when it listened only to itself. In different rooms, at different ends of the same city, they both understood the same truth. Exposure wasn't the end. It was the beginning of responsibility. And responsibility, once claimed in public, had a way of staying claimed. The momentum didn't announce itself. It accumulated. He noticed it first in the smallest places, where change usually hid, before it grew teeth. A revised incident form that asked for narrative instead of checkboxes. A supervisor who paused mid-sentence and said, "Let's hear them out," without irony. A meeting that ended with actions instead of summaries. None of it made headlines. All of it mattered. He kept his distance from the center of it. Advised when asked. Documented what he saw. Corrected language when it drifted toward performance instead of substance. He refused a badge upgrade, declined an office, kept his cart. The work stayed honest that way. Noah adapted faster than anyone. Children always did. He stopped clinging to his backpack in public spaces, started humming under his breath when rooms grew loud. Music class became his favorite hour of the day. The teacher mentioned it casually one afternoon, smiling like she'd noticed something important but didn't need to name it. "You're lighter," she said to him at pickup. He nodded. So is he. At the hotel, Ilara faced the less visible resistance. Not outrage, not revolt, fatigue. People who'd built careers navigating silence didn't enjoy its removal. They questioned the pace, the necessity, the permanence. She listened, acknowledged the discomfort, and kept going. During one board session, a senior member finally said it aloud. This all started because of a song. Ilara met his gaze. "No," she said evenly. "It started because we ignored everything until a song made it impossible." The distinction settled the room. He attended fewer meetings now, by design. The work had to survive without him present. When something worked, he noted it. When it didn't, he said so plainly, without blame. The system was learning, slowly, the way bodies did after injury, cautious, attentive, aware of pain. One afternoon, a technician approached him near the loading bay, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I filed a report last week," the man said. "I thought it'd disappear." "And?" He asked. "They called me in, asked questions, fixed it." He smiled faintly. "Good." The technician hesitated. "You think it'll last?" He considered the question. "That depends on whether people keep expecting it to." Expectation, he'd learned, was a form of pressure. And pressure, applied correctly, could hold structures together. At home, evenings stretched into something like peace. He cooked more, played less, but more deliberately. The old melody surfaced occasionally, always unfinished, always familiar. He let it be what it was, a reminder, not a destination. Ilara walked the building one night after hours, heels quiet, hands empty. She passed the piano without stopping this time. It didn't need reverence. It had already done its work. She paused instead near the service corridor, watching staff move through their routines with less haste, more voice. She thought about legacy, a word she'd once associated only with scale and permanence. It meant something else now. Not what endured, but what changed because you were there. The press cycle moved on, as it always did. Another clip, another outrage. The comments slowed, then thinned. What remained were internal practices that no longer relied on visibility to function. That was the measure that mattered. One morning, Marianne caught him before his shift ended. "They want to document the process," she said. "Case study, training." He grimaced slightly. "As long as it's about systems, not people." She nodded. That was my condition, too. They stood there a moment, listening to the building breathe. The hum was steady, balanced, no longer strained. He hadn't realized how much noise he'd tuned out before. Noah met him at the door that evening holding a crumpled page. "I finished it," he said proudly. The drawing showed a piano, lines radiating outward. Not sound, but effect. People, hallways, doors opening. At the center, a small figure with big hands and calm eyes. "It's you," Noah said, as if stating a fact. He swallowed, then smiled. "It's everyone," he said. "I'm just near the piano." Noah considered that, then nodded, satisfied. Later, after the boy slept, he sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the city through an open window. Somewhere, a bus sighed. Somewhere else, someone practiced scales badly. Life continued, imperfect and persistent. Across town, Ilara closed a report and powered down her screen. The board hadn't applauded. The market hadn't shifted. But something fundamental had recalibrated, and she knew it wouldn't easily slide back. She thought of the moment she'd frozen, the public crack in her composure. Not with embarrassment now, but gratitude. It had been a warning she couldn't ignore. Exposure had done its job. The rest was maintenance. And for once, maintenance was being taken seriously. The invitation arrived without ceremony, tucked into his locker between shift notes and a folded schedule. A simple request for his presence at a staff assembly, time and place specified, no title attached. He read it twice, then closed the locker and went back to work, letting the day keep its shape. The assembly filled the hotel's largest conference room, not with executives alone, but with uniforms, lanyards, scuffed shoes, and pressed suits sharing the same rows. The arrangement felt intentional, No raised platform, no spotlight. Just chairs set in a wide arc, everyone facing everyone else. He took a seat near the aisle, hands resting loosely, attention steady. Noah sat beside Marianne with a sketchbook, swinging his legs, unbothered by the room's weight. The boy's presence softened the edges without trying to. Elira entered last, unaccompanied. The room quieted, not out of fear, but expectation. She stood for a moment, scanning faces she hadn't learned to read until recently, then spoke without notes. "What happened here a few weeks ago was public," she said. And it needed to be. A murmur moved through the room. He stayed still. "I want to be clear," Elira continued. "This isn't about a song. It's about what the song revealed, about how we failed to listen until we couldn't avoid it." She paused, letting the words settle where they would. "I was wrong," she said plainly, about who belonged in which spaces, about whose voices mattered. The admission landed with a quiet force. Not applause, not outrage. Recognition. She turned slightly, gesturing toward him without naming him. The person who played that piano didn't ask for attention. He asked for calm, for care, for the space to do what he knew how to do. Eyes followed her gesture. Some nodded, some looked down, no one laughed. "From this point forward," Elira said, "our systems will reflect that truth. Reporting lines are changing, decision reviews are changing, and accountability will no longer stop where it's convenient." A hand rose in the back. "Oh, housekeeper. Will this last?" she asked, voice steady. Elira didn't deflect. "It will if we expect it to," she said, "and if we hold it to account together." She stepped back, not inviting applause. None came. What followed was quieter, heavier, more durable. Afterward, people moved slowly, conversations unfolding in low tones. A technician thanked him without making it ceremonial. A supervisor apologized without excuses. He accepted both with the same calm, knowing neither was the point. Noah tugged his sleeve. "Did you hear that?" the boy asked. "I did," he said. "They listened." He smiled. "Yes." Outside the room, Elira approached him, careful not to claim the moment. "I meant what I said," she told him, publicly. "I know," he replied. "That's why it mattered." She nodded. "I won't ask you to stay longer than you want, or to be anything you're not." He appreciated that. Then we're aligned. They parted without photographs, without statements. The building returned to its rhythm, altered in ways that wouldn't show on a brochure. That evening, he walked home with Noah, the city humming around them. The boy chattered about school, about a friend who'd learned a new chord, about a hallway that felt less loud lately. At home, he cooked dinner, listened, corrected homework gently. After dishes, he sat at the keyboard and played a few soft notes, letting them fade naturally this time. The old melody hovered, then gave way to silence. Across the city, Elira reviewed feedback from the assembly. Not praise, questions, requests, demands for consistency. She welcomed them. The public moment had done its work. Now came the part that required endurance. She closed the file and looked out at the lights, thinking not of control, but of stewardship. Back in the apartment, Noah yawned and leaned against him. "You didn't freeze," the boy said sleepily. He laughed softly. "Neither did she." Noah smiled, satisfied with that symmetry. The chair had been replaced, the piano lid closed, but the room remembered. And so did everyone who'd seen power pause long enough to hear what it had been missing. He walked the last block slower than usual, Noah's weight light against his side, city noise thinning into evening hush. The assembly replayed in fragments, faces listening. A question asked aloud, an answer left intentionally open. Nothing felt finished, that was the relief. Finishes were tidy lies, this felt like work. At home, routine took over without discussion. Shoes by the door, hands washed, dinner warmed. He listened more than he spoke, letting Noah's stories stretch and tangle. The boy's breathing stayed even, confidence replacing the old vigilance. Stability wasn't dramatic, it was earned. Tonight it held, quietly, without witnesses, present. The following days tested intention. Emails questioned scope, schedules pushed back. Someone asked if the momentum could pause. He answered when asked, plainly, refusing polish. Momentum didn't pause. It redistributed. The work belonged to everyone now, or it failed. That expectation became visible, uncomfortable, necessary, and widely shared across floors. Ilara felt the pressure shift from image to proof. Investors asked sharper questions. Managers submitted fewer decks, more data. She insisted on follow-up, not applause. Public memory kept the standard high. Forgetting would have been noticed. Accountability thrives where witnesses exist. That reality guided decisions daily, even unpopular ones too. He declined interviews and a commemorative plaque. Attention fossilized moments. Systems needed movement. When asked why, he said only that music worked best when it passed through people. Noah nodded at that, understanding more than expected, drawing spirals that looked like doors opening. Each line meant possibility, to him, clearly. At the hotel, a near miss surfaced and resolved without escalation. It was documented, reviewed, fixed, no alarms, no clip, just competence. The absence of drama felt like progress. He noted it, satisfied, and moved on to the next task. That was the goal all along. Quiet success, sustained by care. Ilara walked past the piano again, unremarked now. She smiled at the change, not sentimental, practical. Symbols should dissolve after teaching. She redirected budget to maintenance training and mentorship. Choices unlikely to trend, certain to last beyond her tenure. Legacy reframed itself quietly, in spreadsheets and habits that endured. Longer. One evening, Noah asked if the song would ever end. He answered carefully, saying endings arrive when listening becomes mutual. The boy accepted this, then practiced a chord, smiling when it rang true. Progress sounded like that. Imperfect, shared, alive, and possible for everyone, who stayed attentive, over time, together. The city resumed its indifferent grace. Buses sighed. Windows glowed, past familiar corners carrying less weight. The moment hadn't elevated him, it had redistributed responsibility. That felt right. He never wanted a pedestal, only a system that listened, even when nothing demanded attention. Especially then, most of all, always, present. Ilara closed her notebook at day's end, satisfied but unsentimental. Change required tending. She scheduled reviews months out, resisting shortcuts. The public moment had passed, the obligation remained. Stewardship replaced control, a discipline learned the hard way, under witness, and remembered accordingly, by those present, and many watching. Quietly, still. He checked Noah's backpack before bed, inhaler present, zipper smooth. Ordinary care mattered most. The melody slept tonight. Tomorrow would ask for attention without spectacle. He was ready, not as a hero, as a father who listened and kept listening. When it counted, every ordinary day that followed, forward, onward. The hotel breathed steadily through the night. Somewhere a report was filed and read. Somewhere else a question was asked early. No applause marked it. That was success. Exposure had opened the door. Maintenance kept it open, quietly, together. with patience and shared resolve. After the music faded out, gently. Months later, the clip surfaced again, stripped of urgency. Comments were calmer, informed. Someone referenced policy changes instead of drama. That was the difference. Memory had matured into practice. He smiled at the thought, then returned to work without ceremony. Progress measured quietly, by outcomes alone, not noise anymore. Ilara approved a mentorship budget increase and declined a branding campaign. Substance over shine again. She sent a brief note thanking staff for candor. Replies came quickly. Listening had become reciprocal. Authority felt steadier when shared, less brittle under scrutiny. That stability mattered. In uncertain markets, and lives beyond work. He played once more at home, softly, finishing a phrase he'd never finished before. It resolved, modest and true. Noah listened, smiled, then asked for dinner. The ending didn't demand witness. It belonged to them, and that was enough. Closure arrived without applause, just shared presence, at last, homeward. The story settled where it should, in practice, not myth. A piano returned to furniture. A father returned to routine. A leader returned to listening. None of it erased the moment. It ensured the next one wouldn't need music to be heard. That was the point. All along, simply human, listening. The hotel learned new habits the way cities did. Incrementally, without ceremony, one ordinary decision after another. Mornings arrived with quieter urgency. Afternoons closed without the old strain. The building still glittered when it needed to, but its strength lived elsewhere now. In corridors where questions traveled faster than excuses. He noticed it most when nothing happened. No alarms. No tension. Spikes. No last-minute fixes disguised as heroics. Just systems doing what they were meant to do because someone had listened early. That absence of drama felt like the truest success he'd known. He kept his routine intact. Early bus. Familiar entrance. The same cart rolling across the same floors. People greeted him naturally now, not with reverence, not with avoidance. Just recognition. That balance mattered. Noah grew into the calm he'd borrowed at first. School notes mentioned confidence. Teachers mentioned curiosity. Music stayed a companion, not a shield. At night, the boy sometimes asked about the song, not with anxiety, but interest. Why did it matter so much? He asked once. He thought for a moment. Because it told the truth in a place that wasn't listening. Noah nodded, satisfied, then asked what was for dinner. That too felt right. Ilara adjusted to her new rhythm with discipline rather than nostalgia. She still led decisively, but she measured outcomes differently now. Not by applause or speed, but by whether warnings arrived early and stayed intact as they moved. She demanded proof, not reassurance. Resistance continued, quieter but persistent. She didn't take it personally. Change was supposed to chafe. If it didn't, it wasn't real. She passed the piano one evening and paused, not out of sentiment, but gratitude. It had been an instrument, nothing more. The work that followed had belonged to people. That distinction mattered. Across the city, the clip faded into context. It no longer traveled as spectacle, but reference, used in trainings, cited in conversations about labor and listening. Its power matured. That was rare and earned. He declined a speaking invitation from another property and recommended someone else instead. Listening multiplied best when distributed. He stayed where he was useful, not visible. That choice protected the work. One afternoon, a new hire stopped him with a nervous smile. I asked a question. Today, she said. They answered it. He smiled back. Good. Ask another tomorrow. That night at home, He finished the song alone at the keyboard, not because anyone was waiting, but because it was time. The resolution arrived gently, without flourish, shaped by patience rather than longing. He let the last note fade and closed the lid. No applause followed. No witness needed it. The city kept moving. Buses sighed. Windows glowed. Somewhere, another meeting ended differently because someone remembered to listen first. Somewhere else, a child slept easier. Alara closed her week with a short note to staff, no headline, no framing, thanking them for candor and consistency. Replies came back quickly, practical and honest. She powered down her screen and left the office without fanfare. Stewardship had replaced control. It was quieter, heavier, worth it. The story of the wrong moment softened into instruction. A reminder that power didn't vanish when challenged by truth. It matured. And dignity didn't demand a stage. It required space. If you want the next story title, ask me for it. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. CEO quietly followed single dad janitor after work. What she discovered changed everything. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next? You clean floors, not engines. Don't touch that panel. The CEO's voice sliced through the hangar louder than the turbine wind. His polished shoes stopped inches from the girl kneeling beside the jet's open access hatch. Executives nearby chuckled, someone muttering that $80 million aircraft weren't toys for janitors with a mop. She didn't answer. Didn't argue. Just looked at the silent jet for one long second. 12 minutes later, the same aircraft would roar down that runway while the man who mocked her stood frozen on the tarmac. Because the girl everyone ignored understood the machine better than anyone in that hangar. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because what looked like a janitor being scolded beside a luxury jet wasn't really about cleaning floors at all. It was about a truth powerful people forget too easily. Sometimes, the quietest worker in the room is the only one who knows how to save everything. And before you see the moment when a dead cockpit suddenly flickers back to life while engineers stare in disbelief, you need to understand how a cleaning girl ended up standing beside the most advanced private jet in the country. She was small, barely 18, dressed in a faded gray uniform that hung loose on narrow shoulders. The name stitched on the pocket read Mira Solon. Most people at Halverson Private Aviation Terminal never noticed the name. They noticed the mop, the bucket, the quiet way she moved along polished hangar floors while billionaires arrived in tinted SUVs. But the girl noticed everything. The sound of turbines spooling down, the faint smell of heated wiring inside an open service hatch, the rhythm of engineers arguing about diagnostics while pretending not to look at her. And most of all, the jet. Victor Halverson's jet. It stood at the center of the hangar like a polished monument to wealth, its silver body reflecting the long rows of fluorescent lights above. To everyone else, it was a symbol of power. To the girl holding the mop, it was something else entirely. A machine, a system, something that could break. Her gloved fingers had hovered near the exposed avionics panel for less than 3 seconds, just long enough to recognize the layout. Just long enough for the CEO to see her. "Hey," Halverson snapped again, irritation thick in his voice. "Did you hear what I said?" She stood slowly, calm, unshakable. "I heard you," the girl said quietly. The executives expected an apology, maybe embarrassment. Instead, she simply stepped back from the aircraft and picked up her mop again, as if his anger had nothing to do with her. That calm unsettled him. Powerful men like Victor Halverson were used to reactions. Fear, nervous laughter, quick apologies. But the janitor gave him none of those. She just moved aside and watched. Outside the hangar doors, the evening sky glowed a deep orange as the sun dipped behind distant runways. The air carried the distant howl of departing aircraft and the sharp scent of aviation fuel. A convoy of black SUVs rolled toward the jet. Security opened doors. Assistants rushed forward. Halverson's flight was already late, and tonight's passengers weren't ordinary clients. A pediatric surgeon stepped out of the second vehicle, clutching a small medical bag. Beside her, a boy no older than 8 held her hand, his face pale beneath the airport lights. The doctor's voice carried urgency as she spoke to the ground crew. "Is the aircraft ready?" she asked. "We need to be airborne immediately." One of the engineers nodded. Final systems check, then departure. The child looked toward the jet with wide eyes. To him, the aircraft wasn't a machine. It was hope. The girl watched them quietly from the edge of the hangar, mop resting against her shoulder. A child. A doctor. An emergency flight. Something inside her chest tightened. Because once, not long ago, she had studied machines exactly like this one, back when life looked very different. Back when she had a family. Back when her world wasn't measured by janitor shifts and rented rooms above a laundromat. A mechanic closed the avionics panel she'd been examining earlier and secured the hatch. System check complete, he called toward the cockpit ladder. Halverson clapped once impatiently. "Good, let's move." Executives began boarding. The doctor guided the boy up the stairs carefully. Inside the cockpit, engineers powered up the aircraft's systems. Lights flickered across the instrument panels. Then, silence. The cockpit screens went dark. A sharp alarm chirped once, then stopped. One of the engineers frowned. "That's odd." He flipped a switch. Nothing. Another technician leaned into the panel. What just happened? Outside, Halverson crossed his arms. "Well?" he barked. The engineer's voice drifted down from the cockpit. Avionics just shut down. The hangar fell quiet. Halverson's expression hardened. "You're telling me my jet doesn't work?" The engineers scrambled, pulling diagnostic tablets and opening panels again. Inside the cabin, the doctor's anxious voice rose. "How long will this take?" No one answered. The boy sat silently beside the window, small fingers gripping the armrest. Across the hangar floor, the girl with the mop watched the cockpit screens through the open door. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Because the pattern of failure looked familiar, very familiar. And somewhere deep inside her memory, a lecture hall, a professor's voice, and a simulation warning echoed back to life. She set the mop down. Slowly, then took a step toward the jet. The girl took another quiet step toward the jet. Inside the cockpit, engineers were already speaking faster now, the calm confidence from earlier dissolving into sharp confusion. Tablets flickered with diagnostic readouts, and one technician tapped the side of the avionics panel as if the machine might respond to irritation. "That's impossible," Jonas Pritchard muttered, squinting at the display. The system just rebooted itself into a dead loop. Victor Halverson's voice rose from the hangar floor. To find dead loop, Jonas leaned out of the cockpit door. "The flight computers won't complete startup. Something in the avionics network is blocking initialization." Halverson exhaled sharply through his nose. "Fix it. We're trying." The girl stopped beside the service ladder, eyes lifted toward the dark cockpit screens. The smell of warm wiring drifted faintly through the open hatch. Beneath it, something else, barely noticeable unless you knew machines well. A faint electrical rhythm. Not failure. Conflict. Jonas turned to another engineer. "Pull the secondary diagnostics." The younger technician connected a tablet into the auxiliary port. The screen flashed error after error. Sensor conflict, flight computer restart, system lock. "Why would the sensors fight each other?" the technician asked. Jonas rubbed his temple. They shouldn't. The girl shifted her weight quietly, watching the lines of code scrolling across the tablet. Her voice came soft. Because they're listening to the same signal twice, the two engineers froze. Jonas looked down from the cockpit ladder. For a moment he didn't recognize who had spoken. Then he saw the gray cleaning uniform. "You again," he said. Halverson turned, irritation already rising in his expression. "Didn't I tell you to stay away from the aircraft?" The girl didn't flinch. Her eyes remained on the cockpit instruments. "The left sensor array," she said calmly. "It's feeding duplicate data into the avionics bus." Jonas blinked. "That's not possible." She pointed toward the underside access panel. "The harness under the diagnostic port." The younger engineer frowned. "That's just a sensor relay, not when it loops back through the auxiliary channel." Silence settled across the hangar. Halverson laughed once. A short, disbelieving sound. "You're diagnosing my jet now?" he said, "with a mop in your hand?" The executive standing behind him chuckled politely. The girl lowered her gaze. Not embarrassed, just patient. Jonas hesitated. Because the explanation, impossible as it sounded, matched the error pattern on his tablet almost exactly. He shook his head anyway. "Look," he said, climbing down the ladder, "I appreciate enthusiasm, but this is a very advanced aircraft." The girl nodded once. "I know." Halverson spread his arms dramatically toward the jet. "Exactly. Which is why we pay actual engineers to deal with it." The doctor's voice drifted from inside the cabin. "Excuse me," she called anxiously, appearing at the aircraft door. "How long will this take?" Jonas hesitated. "We're still diagnosing the issue." Her eyes flicked toward the boy sitting behind her. He looked smaller now, pale beneath the cabin lights. "We don't have hours," she said quietly. Halverson stepped forward quickly, smoothing his jacket as if the delay were merely an inconvenience. "Doctor, relax. My team handles problems like this every day." Behind him, the engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Because they didn't, not this kind. The tablet chimed again, another failed reboot. Jonas stared at the screen, system still locked. The girl spoke again. "If you disconnect the sensor harness for 3 seconds, the flight computer will restart clean." Halverson spun around. "Enough." His voice echoed through the hangar. "You've already crossed the line once touching my aircraft." He stepped closer, towering over her. "I'm not about to take technical advice from someone who scrubs hangar floors." The girl met his gaze calmly. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Just said quietly, "It will work." Halverson laughed again. "Of course it will." He turned back toward the engineers. "Are we seriously still standing here listening to this?" Jonas hesitated. Because the error codes on his tablet were now repeating in a pattern. Exactly the pattern she had described. Duplicate sensor input. Auxiliary loop conflict. He frowned slightly. The younger engineer noticed. "You don't think she's—" "No," Jonas said quickly. But the doubt had already entered the room. Across the hangar, the boy inside the jet shifted weakly in his seat. The doctor watched the delay with tightening worry. The girl glanced toward the aircraft door. Her expression softened for a moment. Then she looked back at the cockpit screens. The flicker of dead avionics. The looping errors. The exact failure mode she had once studied in a simulation lab thousands of miles away. A professor's voice echoed faintly in memory. Rare, but catastrophic if ignored. Jonas sighed heavily. "Run the diagnostics again," he told the technician. The tablet beeped. Same result. Halverson's patience snapped. "I'm done waiting," he said sharply. "Call another engineering team. They're 40 minutes away," Jonas replied. Halverson swore under his breath. Inside the cabin, the doctor leaned against the doorway. "We don't have 40 minutes," no one spoke. The silence stretched across the hangar like tension before a storm. Then the girl stepped closer to the ladder. "If you want the jet flying tonight," she said quietly, "you'll need to reset the sensor loop." Halverson's jaw tightened. Jonas stared at her. And somewhere deep inside his professional pride, a small, uncomfortable thought formed. What if she wasn't guessing? Jonas Pritchard didn't answer the question forming in his own mind. Instead, he stared down at the tablet again, as if the screen might prove the girl wrong by sheer stubbornness. The diagnostic loop continued flashing the same warning every few seconds. Sensor conflict. Flight computer restart. System lock. The repetition was starting to feel personal. Behind him, Victor Halverson's patience was thinning like ice under heavy boots. "Well?" the CEO demanded. "Is someone fixing my aircraft, or are we planning to stare at screens all night?" Jonas climbed halfway down the ladder, rubbing the back of his neck. "We're isolating the fault." Halverson gestured sharply toward the cockpit. "You've been isolating it for 10 minutes. 8. Jonas corrected automatically. "That's 8 minutes too long." Inside the aircraft cabin, the pediatric doctor stood beside the small boy now slumped against the seatbelt strap. The harsh white lighting of the jet made the child look even paler. Her voice came down the stairwell, tight with fear. "Please tell me you're close." Jonas glanced toward her and hesitated. Close wasn't the word. The avionics system was locked inside its own software loop. Every reboot triggered the same sensor disagreement, forcing the computers to shut down again. A rare failure. One he had never personally seen in real life. Behind the ladder, the quiet cleaning girl remained exactly where she had been, watching. Her eyes moved across the open avionics hatch, the wires, the diagnostic tablet, the cockpit screens. The pattern was unmistakable now. The exact cascade she had studied once during advanced avionics training. Years ago, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She folded her arms slowly. The hangar smelled like heated metal and impatience. Jonas crouched again beside the open access panel. "Try isolating the primary sensor array," he told the younger technician. The man nodded and began unplugging connectors. The tablet